The heading was, "We will not win this war without women." The media outlet has reported that around 70,000 women are already in the Ukrainian armed forces, and 5.5 thousand of them are performing combat missions. Against the background of desertion that has aggravated after all those corruption scandals, because everyone understands to whom they should sacrifice their lives, not for some motherland, not for Ukrainian people, but for packages with money that are allocated to Bankova by those tranches from the European Union and other countries. Against this background, the news about future possible recruiting of women could be implemented. In order to prolong its existence, the Kiev regime heads are just continuing to sacrifice everyone. Women, young people, it's no difference for them. The Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine has admitted that its policy to destroy the Russian language is not mistaken, but the right one. And according to the European Charter of Regional and National Minorities Languages, it's also about the growth of the use of Russian language, especially among young people. It was confirmed by Yelena Yelanovskaya, ombudsman, and her daughter. You would laugh at that. It's ridiculous. Your daughter is posting on social media in the Russian language. So how does it fit into this policy by the Kiev regime? How have they reached that? It's because they are not normal, because they are insane. It's the extermination of everything that is Russian in Ukraine, despite the protection, alleged protection in their own constitution, Ukrainian constitution, of the Russian language. Somewhere Zelensky just vehemently trying to prove it's about NATO, that it's written in the Ukrainian constitution. But you just choose what you implement and what you do not implement from the constitution. Like Vladimir Vinokur has mentioned, when the fish is packed, and what is about the constitution? What is written about the Russian language? Or have they just let it go by itself for all those sections of the constitution? So the decision by the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, it was obvious the continuation of these destructive lines. It's a testimony of anti-people regime being in power in Ukraine. So people speak Russian, but the regime is destroying, as if it's not, does not understand it's the language in which the people of Ukraine think and speak. And no one mentions that people should speak just one language, because our country is an example of how people, according to their culture, according to their peculiarities of some geographic area, historic context, to study, to have education in different languages. But what is happening in Ukraine with the language, it's just complete insanity. Of course, such steps testify of any aspirations for peace in Kiev, because it should be cancellation of discrimination with regard to the Russian language and the respect for the right of all the nationalities residing in Ukraine. Now the Kiev regime needs to comply with human rights. But the situation with media, the scandal and that gang corruption scandal just growing in volume in Ukraine. So many international anti-corruption structures have been created, and at the domestic level, it's just not corruption in Ukraine, but some construction sites, something has been stolen, or for education, some budget allocations stolen. It's another thing. It's corruption connected with the war, connected with bloody money. And corruption connected with lawless spread of weapons, but not considered by anyone, not taken into account, without any audit. Where is this international community that has just given birth to so many structures connected with international corruption cases and fighting corruption? So where does money come from to Bankova? Those dollars and euros, do they earn them? No, they do not earn them. They just exchange them to the lives of their own citizens. Where does this money come from? From abroad? Who allocates them? If someone has doubts, maybe those allocating this money to Bankova, they are not aware of total corruption in Ukraine. There is just one simple argument against that. In the West, they allocate this money to Kiev. That is why they do not conduct any audits. They do not have any monitoring or analytical mechanisms that could somehow trace where this money goes. And why? Because that's unified corruption chains. And the facts that have been revealed within the Brussels bureaucracy are just a confirmation of that. Mogherini, she's not just alone. She had just the entire team there working. On the 13th of November in Kiev, near the Literature Memorial House of Mikhail Bulgakov, there was another anti-Russian action. The great writer, he was accused in Ukraine. What do you think he was accused of? He was accused of Russian chauvinism and demand that Ukraine be rid of it. But he is dead. He is no longer alive. What will happen further? Will the books by Bulgakov be burned? But if there is some American film based on Bulgakov's novels, will they ban it in Ukraine? Will it not be allowed? But as a proof of crimes by Bulgakov, actually he was born in Kiev. And they used to be proud of him. They used to say that he's a Ukrainian writer, actually. But now, that's it. As they say, he's a representative of Russian chauvinism. As a proof of his crimes, the Banderites just quoted his White God novel with negative characteristics of nationalist hetman Pavel Skoropadsky and Simon Petlura. The Ukrainian National Memory Institute, just in brackets, quotation marks, because it's the National Amnesia Institute, actually, qualified Bulgakov in 2024 as a symbol of Russian imperialist policy. I would like just to ask, is it within the framework of decommunization or fighting Russian imperialism? I'm just interested, because they should just somehow choose. So it's just tireless efforts by Russophobes that are trying to delete, to cut out of public memory any hints of common history of Ukraine and Russia. And there were also statements about the unveiling of sculpture in the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra. Who do you think? Sculpture of whom? Maybe some martyr? No? Hetman Mazepa. Because now it's a museum, actually, and anything can be built there. So now it's Mazapa, no other place where he could be erected. But this event, it was just a quotation.
They just called it as the symbol of continuation of the Ukrainian tradition. But it's just humiliating that they put up this monument. It humiliates the memory of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian history. Well, it's quite interesting that they put up that memorial in that place because the Russian Orthodox Church has put anathema on Ivan Mazapa. That's why putting up the memorial in his honor on the territory of the global Orthodox sacred site is just sacrilegious. Well, they are putting up new heroes. Ivan Mazapa there. Well, the natural course of history will help the Ukrainian people to oust this Banderite gang. All these facts that I mentioned at the briefing confirm that the objectives to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine, as well as to address threats emanating from from its territory, still hold true. Today in the press center of Россия сегодня there will held a presentation on crimes committed against women and children. And the briefing will be provided by Maxim Grigoriev, Mягков, many other officials, Andrei Kartapolov, a member of the State Duma. The UN Security Council approved the resolution that calls to fully observe international norms with respect to women and children. Crimes committed by the Kiev regime is a glaring violation of the UN Security Council resolution. The resolution also says that all states bear responsibility for putting an end to impunity and for holding accountable those who are responsible for the crimes of genocide and acts of violence committed against women and children. The report provides a cogent proof of 4 crimes committed against women and children, which constitute a glaring violation of the Geneva Conventions and the resolution of the United Nations on women, peace and security. We invite everyone to attend this presentation, and this presentation will be available on many platforms of the Russian Foreign Ministry. In many remarks, I've been talking about the price that is being paid by ordinary Europeans for the hybrid war that has been launched by their countries against Russia. They report about the alleged success in the phase out of Russian energy imports. They are so proud of their work. They claim that the phase-out of the Russian energy resources is a huge achievement of the European bureaucracy, and it is a guarantee of the EU's security and prosperity. All this is accompanied by contrived speculation that with each new package of restrictive measures targeting the Russian fuel and energy complex, the collapse of our country's energy sector and economy as a whole is supposedly drawing ever closer. Well, they have put a carrot in front of the European donkey, and they say that you need to run faster because you will reach the carrot. The donkey said that it's not strong enough to go, but they say that you need to make a few steps further to reach the carrot. That's what the situation is today in Europe. They were saying, even Obama was saying, that our economy is nearing collapse, but it's not true, which is confirmed by trends and facts and reality in general. Well, it is difficult. It is complicated. It is a challenge for us. But what they are saying about our country and our economy is total nonsense. But let's talk about what is going on in their own countries with facts in our hands. The reckless termination of Russian energy imports has seriously hit the European Union itself. Having abandoned well-established energy cooperation with our country, the EU has faced a sharp increase in gas prices and, as a consequence, in electricity prices. This is reluctantly but nevertheless acknowledged within the EU itself. According to official EU statistics, in the first half of the current year, the average household gas price amounted to about 115 euros per megawatt hour. For comparison, previously the average gas price in the European Union fluctuated within a range from 5 to 35 euros per megawatt hour. Well, they can still do the math. If we divide 115 euros by, well, let's take not 5 euros, but if we divide 115 euros by 35 euros, well, we can see that the difference is 3 or 3.5. But if we're talking about the average price, it has increased dozens by dozens. In other words, the difference is huge. The average figure does not even reflect the gravity of the problem. In some EU member states, a far more dramatic increase has been recorded. In Sweden, 213 euros per megawatt hour. That's how much Swedish nationals should pay for gas and electricity. In the Netherlands, almost 162 euros. In Denmark, about 131 euros. Against this background, it is telling that in Hungary, which continues to import Russian gas on balanced terms, price is comparable to the pre-crisis levels at about 31 euros per megawatt hour. Well, ordinary people have no right to say anything. I think they will be even punished for asking a question. A similar trend is observed in the EU electricity market. In the first half of 2020, the average household price, including taxes, was about 200 euros per megawatt hour. In the first half of 2025, the price began to approach 300 euros. The situation is particularly acute in Germany at about 384 euros, Belgium around 358 euros, and Denmark around 349 euros per megawatt hour. Electricity prices for industrial enterprises in the EU, including taxes, also remain at a very high level. Instead of pre-crisis prices of 80 euros per megawatt hour in the first half of the current year, this figure more than doubled, reaching about 190 euros. The highest prices in the EU are paid by enterprises in Ireland, paying almost 273 euros, and Italy, which pays around 234 euros per megawatt hour. These are not political assessments. These are simple facts. Well, probably the Russian ambassador in Italy will be summoned to the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs because they believe that we have no right to speak about the situation in their countries. If they understand that they are a democratic country, it is normal when people are speaking truth using simple facts. While officials in Brussels credit themselves with progress on the path toward energy independence from our country, ordinary Europeans and EU industry are bearing the heavy burden of financing the geopolitical ambitions of Ursula von der Leyen and her associates. I would like to repeat. These are real funds that are being siphoned off every day by the EU leaders from the pockets of literally every ordinary European. At the same time, European enterprises are forced to pay 2 or 3 times more than for electricity than their American counterparts, and 4.5 times more for gas. This has already led to mass closures of production facilities and their relocation to third countries. Key energy-intensive industry sectors are in deep crisis. Production capacities are being reduced across the board, and EU products are becoming increasingly uncompetitive. The problem of energy poverty is extremely acute. In 2024, almost every 10th European could not afford to heat their home adequately. Moreover, given the European Commission's plans to completely abandon Russian gas no later than, as they claimed, January 1st, 2028, and replace it with more expensive American liquefied natural gas, the European Union will face a further deterioration of the relevant indicators. They even forget to say to their own nationals, because this is not just a more expensive US liquefied natural gas. It will be even more unpredictable. It's not even a fact that they will be allowed to enter any long-term contracts. The Russian Federation, in its turn, offered to enter into long-term contracts with fixed prices so that they would have an opportunity to ensure their development that will allow us to have profits, and to live in peace and coexistence with the European countries. Anglo-Saxons are not going to treat them in a good way. They will hold them. They will provide them gas and electricity as treats to a pet. And once they do something wrong, all the gas imports from the United States will be stopped, even at exorbitant prices. Meanwhile, a wave of cost-cutting and Christmas elimination is beginning across the EU. Cities in Europe are being forced to abandon festive lighting of streets and squares due to a lack of funds to pay for electricity. It doesn't mean that they won't have any festive lights, but there will be less of them due to the lack of funds. The European Union is plunging into darkness in all senses, in all possible ways. But we're just saying that with a small hint, with a small remark, that we warned you about it and you didn't believe us. And now a number of news that are related to humanitarian, historical sphere and international sphere. In Ankara, on November 18th, an opening ceremony of a bust of the outstanding Balkar poet Kaysin Kuliyev was held in one of the parks in Ankara, in Turkey. Kaysin Kuliyev was a laureate of the USSR State Prize, the International Lenin Prize, and the Maxim Gorky State Prize. A veteran of the Great Patriotic War and the author of numerous works, Kuliyev made a significant contribution to world culture and became a vivid expression of the spiritual strength of the Balkar people and of all Russia. The event was attended by the leadership of the Russian embassy in Turkey, the mayor of the Keçiören district of Ankara, creator of the bust, Leon Akhmatov, member of the Union of Writers of Russia, Asker Daduev, as well as representatives of the poets' families, the diplomatic corps, and the local community. We are grateful to the Turkish authorities and the Federation of Caucasian Associations in Turkey for their assistance and participation in the opening of the monument. We are convinced that promoting the works of the Balkar poet in Turkey will contribute to the further strengthening of Russian-Turkish cultural ties. And some news about France. Oleron Island, on November 24th, a solemn flowers laying ceremony at the graves of Soviet citizens who took part in the resistance movement during the Second World War was held in France on Oleron Island with the participation of the Russian ambassador Alexei Meshkov and diplomats of the embassy. This year, with the assistance of the Russian Military Historical Society, the tombstones of our compatriots Vladimir Antonenko, Mikhail Yershov, Alexander Kovalyev, and Evgeny Krasnopur Krasnoperov, who fell in battle during the liberation of the island, were restored at the cemetery of the town of St. Pierre de l'Iran. During the war, Oleron was part of the so-called Atlantic Wall, a system of defensive fortification built by the Nazis. Among the imprisoned construction workers, there operated a group of Soviet patriots led by Antonenko, who carried out acts of sabotage and diversion. In particular, they mined and blew up a German gunpowder depot, destroying the island's entire powder stock. Antonenko and Krasnoperov were shot by the Nazis on the day of the island's liberation, just a few days before victory on April 30th, 1945. The fate of the Soviet prisoners of war who joined forces on Oleron with the first wave Russian immigrants is the subject of the documentary film Voices of Oleron, which is available for a wide audience on the internet. It should be noted that the visit of the Russian ambassador to the region provoked outright hysteria among the so-called pro-Ukrainian associations and activists, who even tried to disrupt the commemorative events. Well, they stopped laying flowers at the Soviet war memorials because Shukhevich and Bandera are more interesting to them. Our heroes were not on the side of Bandera and Shukhevich when they were fighting in the Oleron Islands. Well, this is hardly surprising, since the current Banderite regime in Kiev is the ideological heir of those against whom our heroic resistance fighters in Oleron took up arms. It is encouraging that the many local residents, ordinary French people, expressed their indignation to social media and its conversations over attempt to prevent Russian diplomats from paying tribute to the patriots who died for the liberation of the island and of France as a whole from the Nazis. This ceremony became one of the landmark military memorial events organized by the Russian embassy in France in the year of the 80th anniversary of the Great Victory. It is intended to remind people of the significant contribution made by our compatriots to the resistance movements of French territory, of the key role of the Soviet Union in the defeat of Nazism and the liberation of Europe, and of whom France ultimately owes its status as Victorian power. And in Belarus, a monument to Rokossovsky was unveiled on November 26. The monument was presented as a gift from the Russian Federation to mark the 82nd anniversary of the liberation of the Gomel region from German fascist invaders. At that time, Rokossovsky, a native of Belarus, commanded the Belarusian front and made a significant contribution to the Bagration offensive. The monument shows in metal the 1945 victory parade, which Rokossovsky commanded. The pedestal marks the sites of key battles during the liberation of the Gomel region in 1943, while the base of the sculpture depicts images of Nazi standards thrown at the foot of the mausoleum on Red Square in Moscow. In his welcoming address, chairman of the Russian Military Historical Society, Vladimir Medinsky, emphasized the unity of the peoples of Russia and Belarus, who, just as in the harsh years of the Great Patriotic War, stand shoulder to shoulder to ensure the defense and security of our common Union state. He underscored the importance of preserving the historical memory of outstanding military and state figures in order to convey the truth about the heroic past to future generations. Belarusian speakers at the ceremony noted the unshakable nature of the historical brotherhood between Russians and Belarusians, which has withstood a centuries-long test of time, trials, and victories over common enemies. At the same time, it was noted with regret that, unlike Belarus, to the west of the Union state border, a systematic and relentless campaign has been ongoing for many years to destroy the Soviet memorial complexes and barbarically erase pages of the history of the Great Victory with the aim of denigrating the liberators and whitewashing war criminals. On the day of the unveiling, the Rokossovsky Memorial was visited by over 15,000 residents and guests of Gomel. This testifies to the fact that people remember and honor the memory of their true heroes. Against this background, the venomous and rude reaction of pro-Western channels, which seized with indignation on social media over yet another evidence of the fraternal unity of the peoples of Russia and Belarus, is telling. Again, they understood that we remember and we honor the memory of those who made our life possible today. We are grateful to the Belarusian authorities for supporting the initiative of the Russian Embassy in Belarus and the Russian Military Historical Society, as well as for the high quality of the event's organization and the landscaping of the area adjacent to the monument. We intend to continue our active joint efforts to perpetuate the memory of our great ancestors. And now another announcement, quite an important international information. On December 8th, I recall, It will mark the 34th anniversary of the signing of the agreement establishing the Commonwealth of Independent States. This document played a truly historic role, preventing the severance of centuries-old ties between the Union republics and their peoples and laying down sustainable principles for interaction among the newly independent states. The Commonwealth is the most representative organization in the post-Soviet space in terms of membership. Projects are being implemented within the CIS framework in virtually all spheres: political, economic, cultural, and humanitarian, as well as security. Coordination of positions on pressing issues on the international agenda is actively pursued. A solid legal framework has been established and continues to develop, comprising over 650 international treaties. Cooperation between the CIS and external partners is growing, primarily with the UN and leading Eurasian structures such as the EAEU, the CSTO, and the SCO. And on October 10th, at the Commonwealth Summit in Dushanbe, the SCO was granted observer status with the CIS. The CIS countries do everything to preserve the objectives and purpose of this association. We have a free trade zone for goods and services, with over 95% of transactions between Russia and other Commonwealth member states being conducted in national currencies. An effective system of multilateral mechanisms aimed at strengthening international security has been established within the organization. Close coordination of actions in this area within the CIS, combined with joint efforts with other regional associations, facilitates the fulfillment of tasks related to combating terrorism, extremism, drug trafficking, and organized crime, as well as protecting external borders. A paramount achievement of the Commonwealth is the preservation of a unified cultural and humanitarian space. The states and peoples of the CIS are united by shared spiritual and moral values based, among other things, on a cherishing of traditions and a shared past. Of particular significance in this regard is the victory in the Great Patriotic War, the 80th anniversary of which was celebrated together this year, including in St. Petersburg, like we are celebrating it today at the forum I'm attending. For Russia, building friendly, equal, and mutually beneficial ties within the CIS is a key foreign policy priority, and also December 8th marks the 26th anniversary on signing the agreement on establishing the Union States. For Russia and Belarus, this event marked a new stage in the process of uniting our peoples based on the principles of sovereign equality and the voluntary and good faith fulfillment of mutual obligations. It has become one of the advanced and ambitious integration projects in Eurasia.
Considerable progress has been made in the forming of common social, economic, transport, logistics, humanitarian, cultural, migration, and information space. And the financial and economic, scientific and technological sovereignty of the Union State is being strengthened. Now the Council of the Union State has played an important role, and a bilateral treaty on the guarantees of securities within the Union State has entered into force on the 13th of March 2025. A solid foundation has been laid in the common obligation for defense, sovereignty protection, independence, constitutional order of Russia and Belarus, as well as the protection of territorial integrity and the protection of borders of the countries, with the use of all the forces and means available. Now there are initiatives for the period from 2024-2026. They include the tasks of further forming of social and economic space, strengthening cultural and humanitarian ties, creation of comfortable conditions for the lives of our citizens and for businesses, as well as the growth in joint investments and implementation of innovation projects. The work is carried out for integration landmarks for the period of 2027-2029. Now there is also work for integration of innovation and technology with the economy, and we mark the anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War. There is a wide-scale event of thematic events of the Union States. a major plan for that. The initiator has been the International Patriotic Forum Great Heritage Common Future. There is a project for young children of the CIS states, and the project Train of Victory, and festival Young People for the preservation of the historic memory. And there was also an international youth summit, Russia and Belarus, Common History, Common Fate. Media companies of the Union State are being launched in order to unite the media work of the two countries and to bring their work to a new level. Now a bigger impetus will be given to this work, because this media resource, it will operate, it will exist. And Russian and Belarusian diplomats coordinate their approaches intensively and share their positions nearly in all the issues of the global agenda. The priorities of the two ministries of foreign affairs include diplomatically accompanying the integration processes and joint declarations and reports under the auspices of the Union State. Common approaches are being developed for foreign policy interaction. Such a meeting was held on the 25th of November, as we have informed you, in Moscow. The Supreme State Council of the Union State is to hold its meetings and to determine the key tasks of the Union for the near perspective. We do not intend to stop, and we will continue to implement the will of our brotherly people for cooperation and deepening the partnership for social and economic progress of the two states, strengthening their positions on the international arena and for the benefit of our citizens. Now one more remarkable, I think, but I think among notorious topics. On the 2nd of December, the Parliament of the Faroe Islands approved the amendments to local legislations. What do you think it was? It's a legal framework for the enlargement of the autonomy participation in illegal anti-Russian sanctions by the EU. That's ban on fishing of Murmansk Seafood and Noreba, Russian fishing companies. Although Thornshaven has been supporting the anti-Russian policy of Copenhagen since 2022, this step, I think, it's unprecedented because it has been adopted under an absurd pretext. Allegedly, Russian fishing vessels participating in some hybrid operations, maybe some plot of fish. They have revealed that, but detected, but those were just baseless accusations by the Faroe side and by the EU that has initiated those restrictions. And other states have supported, including Norway. Moreover, the authorities of the autonomy have repeatedly confirmed the lack of proof of some illegal activity by Russian fishing ships. But this concept, how is it united into some unified idea? It's difficult to say. It all indicates the politically motivated nature of those changes. It was despite the protests by some politicians, business circles, and public figures. It's just this notorious Euro-Atlantic solidarity. Thornshaven is ready to abandon the pragmatism it used to demonstrate in international relations, but for what? For the sake of what? Just because of the pressure. Because for decades our country has been a partner of the Faroe Islands in fishing. For example, Russia has provided considerable assistance when the Faroe fishermen faced sanctions by Copenhagen and the so-called allies, the EU and Norway, when in 2013 there were restrictions against the Faroe Islands. So far we have abstained from countermeasures against Stonshaven since 2022. It was for constructive links in fishing, constructive ties. But all that just questions the relations in fishing, fruitful relations, bilateral cooperation since the 27th of November 1977. And adequate response measures are to be taken. Now the adoption by the General Assembly by consensus of the unified negotiations format on international communication security, international information security, global mechanism on developments in the field of ICTs. The agenda includes all the sphere of digital space, international security, building trust between states, capacity building in ICT security. The parameters of the future body have been determined that would respond to the interests of the global majority and the participation of all the UN member countries without exception, and intergovernmental nature of the negotiations and the consensus procedure. So we call upon all the countries to participate in this depoliticized and constructive mechanism, and Russia will continue its efforts to overcome digital gap and to ensure international security and respect of sovereignty in international information security. Now one more announcement about the 10th International Cadet Charity Ball in the Kremlin. Now it's the cooperation of schools with cadet classes, activists of patriotic, volunteer, youth and sports organization in Russia and abroad. It's about popularizing the rich military traditions and taking into account the anniversary of the great victory. Special attention will be paid to veterans and participants in the special military operation and their relatives. This event is supported by year on year by the President of the Russian Federation, of course the regions, the legislative authorities. So many welcoming statements to participants of this very beautiful and very important event. And Sergei Lavrov has also sent a welcoming statement to the participants of this cadet ball. It will be about mercy, courage, and the love for the fatherland. And I'm ready to answer your questions now. We have hybrid format today. There will be some questions from those who are present and from our participants online. Now let us start with those who are present. 78th channel, Ksenia Kirtishnikova. Actually, I have some questions. The first one, as Rustem Umerov headed the Ukrainian delegation for negotiations with Russia and the US, how do you think it could influence future possible negotiations on the settlement of the conflict in Ukraine? Could you please repeat once again? I misheard. Could you please repeat your question? Rustem Umerov, instead of Andrei Yermak, headed the Ukrainian delegation for negotiations with the US and Russia. How do you think it could influence negotiations aimed at the settlement of the conflict in Ukraine? You know, I would like to remind you, it's not the first time. As we know, Umerov has already headed the Ukrainian delegation during the 3 rounds of negotiations in Istanbul that were then paused by the Kiev regime. For us, it's not the personality of some Kiev regime or Ukraine representative that matters, but the substantive talk aimed at the elimination of the root causes of the conflict. Whether Umerov is ready for that, I think time will show in the specific result. My second question, what friendly states are influenced in visa-free trips to Russia, and what conditions are to be observed for the cancellation of visas by us? So, to reply which countries are interested, I think all the countries are interested. Naturally, all the countries with normal regimes who are not aggressive. For citizens to have more access, easier access, movement, enshrined in many international documents, but I think this question is not very relevant because it does not have some specific answer. And what conditions, what requirements, it's always discussed with the relevant country, and in our country an interagency development process should be carried out, and then such decisions are taken. For example, as in the case with China, such decisions have been taken on a mutual basis. So my third question is about the number of Chinese tourists in Russia. When will it go back to pre-pandemic levels? And is there now an objective to diversify the area of tourism in Russia, tourism to Russia? So it's more of a question for the authorities who are engaged in the touristic exchanges. Regarding the Chinese tourists, I think it's obvious there will be more of them, because recently a decision has been taken. It has been declared officially that mutual decision, visa-free regime for Chinese citizens, that facilitation for the specific categories, and that will just contribute to touristic exchanges. Now is international life, международная жизнь with us online. We will just go one by one, those who are present and those who are online. So a former senior British officer has told that British Special Forces in Afghanistan, it's about the events that took place 12 years ago. He committed war crimes by executing several suspects, and despite the knowledge of that, the superiors had done nothing about it. But this comment, there was a comment, but I would like just you to detail on that more. Actually, we come back to that regularly, because we're not so much concerned about domestic affairs of Great Britain, but it's an international fact, because actually Great Britain just makes such declaration that there's canonically adhere to human rights, but we see that that is not the case, and we see the new proof of that, because those extrajudicial killings, those facts, like including British commandos and the 22nd Special Air Service Regiment. Just to remember this military operation, it was called Enduring Freedom. All those facts were revealed during some years. The relevant public inquiry is being carried out in the UK. The testimonies of 4 British servicemen have been published. They spoke about the killings of women and children and other criminal offenses by servicemen. The captured Afghans were regularly shot because allegedly they planned attacks against soldiers. Cases are also cited when in clearing some objects by special services representatives, they fired at an anti-mosquito net, behind which it was further proved women and children were hiding. So the details have been falsified further because it's a crime. It's not just killing, it's a crime. And the person who fired, he was awarded. Just imagine this level of cynicism. And there were internal checks that were just of formal nature. And they were needed in order to create an illusion of control over the situation. And I would repeat, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and its replies to questions and reactions to public material has repeatedly assessed publicly such crimes, actually military crimes by the British. And I will post links to these materials in the text of the Today briefing. The materials we have cited for many years. In 2023, we mentioned it during the briefings. There were messages, statements for the media. Now the White Book on crimes against civilian population in Afghanistan. We will also post a link to that. So all the public facts and the facts that are to be revealed need to be thoroughly investigated, and the guilty should be prosecuted. So those Western servicemen, they are just ignorant when it concerns civilian lives, but they're just teaching others and just meddling in the affairs in some other parts of the world, and they do not see what is happening just nearby. It's hypocrisy, double standards. And I would remind you that London has repeatedly positioned itself nearly as some paragon in human rights, but it has ignored just near paragon in morality and humanity. It was teaching others. So I would highlight that the crimes by British servicemen and those who were representatives of military contingents taught by those servicemen according to their standards. So they just need the attention of what is just mentioned by the Westerners, the Hague Tribunal. So maybe they will think about that. Thank you. Ria Novosti, please.
Thank you, Ms. Zakharova. Christina Rodriguez, we have 2 questions for you. First, I would like to know what are the priority issues that the Russian delegation wants to raise at the OSCE Foreign Ministers Council on December 4th and 5th, and I would like to say that the Russian delegation will be led by Grushko. I like to say that the strategic statement was made by the Russian side in the article published